Session number 8. And today we continue our study of development on Creatio platform, and we will work with pure C# code today. We will work with web services. You will see how you can build new classes in Creatio, how you can turn such classes into web service. And web service is something that can be called from client side easily with HTTP queries. So we will call it from Creatio side. We will call it from third-party applications. We will know how authentication can be done and what types of authentication are supported in Creatio. And finally, I will tell you some words about session data, about corresponding system settings, and about how to make a web service anonymous if necessary. It's also possible to make your services anonymous, but of course, you should consider some downsides of it and security compromises. So today we focus on backend and on web services and on classes. And first of all, I need to tell you that in Creatio, we already studied a lot of items and we already know how to use C# code in business processes. We discovered it yesterday and we made an example which used a method body of a C# script. So it was not a real C# module, it was only script. And we were able to run it easily from business process. So here was our yesterday example. And we made a script which we were able to easily run. This was C# script. Today, I will show you a bit more complicated thing because we will study how to make a fully separate independent C# module in your package. And this can be done with the tool which is called C# source code, or simply source code, but of course you should understand this is only C#. You can find a lot of examples of such C# sources. So you can search for all packages. You can see all items here. It's hard to find out how many are there, but you see that it's definitely more than 200 or 300. So a lot of examples. You can easily open any of them. And this is how Creatio proves that this is a system with open source configuration. So you can open and look into almost every C# file in Creatio, and you can see and analyze it. Of course, to operate with this kind of files, it requires some C# knowledge, C# basic experience, and you should know some kind of C# uh, like beginner things, like uh, all these reserved words, or the structure of a document, how it should be written properly. So we will work with such examples and you will see how to do this. So in general, in Creatio, you can create your own classes. You can do any kind of logic in your class. When you save, then you compile your package, because mainly you operate with packages compiled as separate assembly. So you can see that most of packages have this option. No, I'm not lucky. Okay, somewhere here, probably we have it. Yes, compile as separate assembly. Most of modern packages are made with this option. And of course, our solution, package, properties, compilation, compile as separate assembly, which makes it really attractive. And this helps us to compile our package fast without compiling all the system. In general, in total, let me show you about DLLs and compilation. So as a result of compilation, we will have DLLs. Normally, your package DLL is saved here in PKG folder, your package folder, files, bin, DLL. This is our DLL as a result of our compilation of our package. There are a lot of DLLs in our system, so we can search, for example, here, search for DLL, and we will see how many files, 180 different DLLs, so all of them are here as a result of compilation of you also see there are some duplicates, but they are results of compilation of different packages. And also we have very big DLL in auto generate, no, in bin of main in terms of configuration bin. Then you can see this big, relatively big DLL with almost 12 megabyte size. This is the result of compilation of all base platform packages, which are not compiled as separate assembly. And we have a lot of such packages here. They are usually old. They are not made as compiled as separate assembly, so they are called like a plain or simple package, and all of them are compiled into this big DLL. Why you need to know about DLLs? Because this is a result of compilation of all your backend functionality. So whatever you do in your package or somewhere in your system, whatever you compile in source codes and business processes, maybe in user tasks, everything in server side will be finally collected and properly set and compiled. So you will finally get these DLL files as a result of your compilation. In case of package compiled as separate assembly. By the way, such packages appeared somewhere in version 7.17 or 7.18, something like this. So before version 8 appears. And compiling a separate assembly generally makes your server-side C# development faster because you spend less time on compilation. You can build your own C# sources. You can build your own classes. There is no difference and no any specific changes related to Creatio. You may only find out that if you look into C# sources somewhere in Creatio examples, you usually see that it uses special namespace, TerraSoft configuration, but this is just a tradition. You may use any namespace, you may create your own namespace, so it's up to you. We usually use a lot of TerraSoft made assemblies and namespaces. All of them are physically made by Creatio. TerraSoft is a previous name of Creatio company. It's a previous brand name, and it was started before 2016. So we have kind of legacy here, and this legacy is so big and so deeply named, then developers just fail to rename it once. And because we have a lot of tens of thousands of customers who already use such namespaces, already use some code, so we simply cannot easily rename it. That's why we have a lot of assemblies and libraries still named TerraSoft. And you should remember and understand all of them are made by Creatio. Usually when you build your own classes, you will need some namespaces from TerraSoft. Now, let's go and look into special type of classes. They are called web services. In Creatio, we can make web services based on WCF, Windows Communication Foundation. You can find a lot of examples if you search from all configurations through source codes for the word service. There is a tradition that if you have a C# source, and if you want to make kind of web service, so it will be callable from client side. Usually developers name and give titles for such items, including word service inside. So if you see something like service, it usually means then that you will have kind of classes designed for work with web queries. Maybe this is not good example for it, but this one will be definitely a good example. So when you see service, it usually means this is a web service, and in Creatio, in order to create a web service in .NET, Framework here, we should create special classes, but in order to turn it into a web service, we must use special namespaces here, system service model and some other, and we should use special C# attributes. In C# it's called decoration, and such attributes tell compiler that this is not just a random class. This class should be turned into a web service. It should be automatically registered at your web application, at your web server. And there are some special settings that tell to compiler how to do this exactly. Inside of our class, we usually have some methods. Regular methods will be callable only inside of your class, not with HTTP queries. But methods with special decoration, with C# attribute, operation contract, and some special web invoke attributes will be turned into web service endpoints. So it will be something that we can call using HTTP queries from client side at our web server. So if you have a class decorated with service contract, and you have at least one method decorated with operation contract, it means that your class has something callable, and we will be able to run this method using HTTP queries. I randomly selected example which is unnecessarily complicated. I recommend you a very good example, and you should remember only one word, crypto. We have C# source code in our base configuration, which is called cryptographic service. And this is perfect for study, for learning so Creation web service basics. So it's not difficult, it's not big, and it's very easy to see and understand. And if you have some kind of experience in C#, you will find it not very difficult and you will understand everything easily. Also, we have some documentation explaining how to build web services, but I prefer practical approach. I prefer to look into examples, to see settings, to see some sense behind it. Of course, if you have lack of knowledge, you should look into our articles, into backend, into how to build web services, how to see some overview examples, and so on. So, of course, you will need to read this article about web services. And you will see all the steps for it. Now I will show you example, because the most key parts here are hard to remember. And that's why maybe it makes sense to find and to remember just a little word, crypto. Then you will always be able to find this item in one of the base parent packages in CRT base. So this source code will be always there. And this is how you can easily get all necessary parts, which is hard to remember, but you can easily copy and paste them. So how you do your own web service, and probably we need to first start with the question why you need to have web service. In Creatio, we have a lot of existing web services. Let me show you how we can search. So we go to all our application folder, and we will search for every C# file which has service contract attribute in the text. I expect 160, approximately 160 web services, decorations. So it's not decorations, it's 160 files. Maybe one file includes more than one web service class, but usually it's only one. And you can see 162 examples. So it tells us it is very popular. And this is something which is commonly used in Creatio. It's not just random one or two examples. This is common feature which is used quite generally in Creatio. So what I want to show you now, web service is a server-side functionality written in C#. So it has very big variety of potential features and tools, and it has very high speed. It has direct access to the database. It can use memory. You can operate with Redis. You can do pretty much whatever you want to do in .NET using server-side logic, code, and framework. So this is universal server-side backend functionality, which has a common purpose. So it's not just some kind of very special tool. It's a common purpose. You can operate with strings. You can operate with data, with any kind of data, with images, with third-party assemblies. So whatever you can do in .NET and C# can be done inside of web service. So it's common server-side backend functionality. It works like a function. So you usually call it. You may transport some arguments. Here you can see example. So we have some arguments for a method that we call, and also usually it returns some result, just to understand some useful data, maybe to understand if it was correctly executed or we have some kind of error. So it's like a function, which is really powerful, which is hosted somewhere at server side, which requires compilation. And that's why it runs really fast. It can accept some data. Maybe you can do a web service with no arguments. This is also correct. You can do this. But usually it makes sense to transport some data as argument, and it makes sense to get some data as a result. Inside of a web service body, we have a method, and here we have method body. We can do different C# code, and there are no limitations. You can do whatever you can compile in your .NET framework in Creatio application. So everything you can do this will work. So we will not make too many different examples, because it's only limited with your C# skills and your knowledge of some of Creatio assemblies. So this is a universal backend functionality which can be called with HTTP queries. The most important is how you do these calls, and in Creatio you can do it with a REST API calls with HTTP queries. The most popular method for calls for HTTP queries in Creatio is POST. It doesn't refer to the operation that you do. So maybe you already learned that GET is something for reading, POST is something for insert. In Creatio, there is no such rule, and POST means everything, and there is no special definition. We can also do some simple research through all configuration in C#, and let's find out how many times we can see the GET word faced in our C# sources. We'll have 15 or 19 examples where a GET can be found. So it's not so many. Maybe we can also do this. This search will be more consistent. So let's search exactly this method get, maybe 15 examples, 19. Okay, so we have only 19 examples where web services are designed with get query. And if we search for similar things, but with a post, we'll find more than 150 examples, so almost 10 times more frequently it's used with post query. So in Creatio, post is something kind of a standard. It's something that was used generally, and almost any operation in Creatio web services is made with a post query. Post is well protected. It offers a lot of possibilities to transport complex data arguments. Here you can see that data arguments can be not just plain values. You can use some structures, you can use lists, you can use arrays, you can use different data types. Post query offers more or less comfortable and easy transporting of such data in a serialized request body. We will work with it, you will see it. So post query is kind of popular, and here you can also see it almost everywhere. We have some settings in your class and in your methods which are hard to remember. I prefer just to copy and paste such settings. If I need to go deeper, we can do some research. What does such a setting mean? But usually it's enough just to copy and paste such items, and they are hard to remember. So you can just copy, and that's how you can do a web service. So when I need one more web service for me in Creatio at server side, I can just find some good examples like this cryptographic service, make copy of this text, of course, changing class name, changing method names, maybe adding some necessary namespaces, and of course, programming method body. One web service, one class may have many different methods, and if you decorate them with operation contract, it will be callable. So you will be able to run such methods from your client side or from third-party side. If you have methods in your class not decorated with such C# attributes, such methods will be not callable, but not callable with client side, but of course you can use it inside of your code, inside of your methods. You can call your class method. It's okay. Probably it's enough for theoretical thing. Let's make practical example. So we go to our package. We can add new C# source. And I will also show you how we can integrate Visual Studio with our development. So we have to create C# source item only from configuration section. We cannot make it from scratch on disk. So let's create it. New C# source item. We have to provide some code and title for it. We can call it USR Realty Service. Because we follow this tradition, if we design a web service, we include the word service into name or title. Now you see USR Realty Service. So we plan to do some code here. This will be some C# code here. And if you operate with cloud environment and you have no options to run it locally, then the only editor that you can use is this embedded editor in Creatio. And this is not very powerful. It's not the same powerful as Visual Studio. It will not help you with background syntax checks or with some highlighting errors while you type it. So this editor is functional. You can write down your code here, but it will be not very easy because you will do mistakes, you will compile, you will see compilation errors and so on. I will show you how we can save this and then connect with Visual Studio and use Visual Studio for development of our web service code. This use of external editor is only possible if we enabled file system development mode. Before going to external editor, we must save everything to file system, so download packages to file system to guarantee that all the items, especially marked with such stars here, all the items should be properly saved on disk before you start to do changes at file system. Sometimes you may notice that such items still have this star, and I think this is kind of a bug behavior. So this is something that probably core developers did not expect, did not operate. But usually when you run action download to file system, everything is saved properly. So you should not afraid of such stars here. You may just ignore them if you already made this action and it finished correctly. So how we can use external editor? I need to show you some file system part. Inside of pkg, we have our folder with our package. This package has files, and inside of it, we have csproj. This csproj is a C# project file, which you can open in Visual Studio and edit. And it includes a list of some sources, and sources also collected from schemas and from some items that require compilation in our schemas. Also, this C# project includes some automatically generated files as we get it from business process. We already debugged it yesterday. So let me show you how to do this. If I want to debug, I will need to run my Visual Studio as administrator. Now trying to run my Visual Studio. I'm using Community Edition, so it's cheap and we can use it for free, and it's fully functional for me to do some kind of C# development. File, open, project. We go to certain application, D1, then we go to Microsoft configuration, pkg, we find our package, and our package is compiled as separate assembly, so we have separate project file for it, files, csproj. This user realty csproj. We can open it. If you have previous experience of working with audio creation versions where no packages compiled as separate assembly were used, then you probably remember how you opened Microsoft configuration SLN solution file. This big solution file requires thousands of C# sources. It also consumes huge amount of RAM in Visual Studio after loaded there. So now you can see consumption of Visual Studio now is not so high. So working with a separate package, separate DLS and separate compilation, of course, it's much better from many points of views and also from development speed perspective. So here we have our C# code. We can start to change it. And when we work in Visual Studio, it helps a lot because it has IntelliSense, autocomplete, background syntax check. It shows us highlighting and displaying errors and potential solutions and so on. So all we do here is just to use a powerful editor to get C# text. And finally, we will save it to disk. I already have an example of a web service. Here I have an example of a simple web service. I will copy and paste it. I will also copy and paste it for you as a text messages in chat. Unfortunately, chat messages, so you can only see the text if it was made as a chat messages, not as a code. Oh, sorry, not as a code inside. Oh, sorry, not as a file. I could send it as a single file, but in this case, it will be not remembered in our Zoom chat. So files are not saved, and the text is saved into history. That's why I put it as separate text messages. So let me explain what happens here. This is example of a simple, very simple web service. And this example is a class declaring a class inheriting from base service. This base service is very important inheritance. Technically, it's not required to make your class to be a web service. The most required setting is service contract. But inheriting from base service, which is declared and designed somewhere in TerraSoft Web Common namespace, will give us a lot of important support. One of the most important pieces is user connection. So if we create a web service inherited from base service, you will get user connection property. So it's inherited from base service, and it will be properly initialized. So you will get correct user connection reference when your web service method will be processed as a result of HTTP call. User connection here, thanks to base service. And base service also has constructors, and this user connection is properly initialized. You may notice this strange declaration of an interface, I read-only session state. This makes sense only for IIS and for .NET Framework. It doesn't make sense for .NET Core. And its main purpose is to make better performance for IIS in high load conditions. And it's interesting that without such interface support, without declaring this interface, under high load conditions in IIS, where you have thousands or hundreds of queries per second, your IIS will process queries and methods for your class in a queue, one by one. So this is how IIS normally works. But if you tell to your class, and finally you tell to IIS with this interface support, so you declare support of read-only session state interface, this is a marker interface, and it doesn't require any methods for it. And this marker interface tells to IIS that your web service does not operate and does not save session state values. So you declare that in your method, you only read some session status, and it means that IIS will know that it's safe to run many methods at the same time. So this will allow IIS to process many web server calls for your web service at the same time using multi-threading, and it will help in high load conditions. If you don't set this interface and make high load conditions, you may face that your IIS is like a bottleneck for your general performance. So this is for performance. And this is for you to know that it helps only for .NET Framework for IIS. It doesn't make any change for .NET Core. And it's interesting that the same code, if you make it like this, will make a web service for IIS web server and for .NET Core platform. There is for Linux, there is a web server named Kestrel. And for Windows, you can also run Creation as a .NET Core app. And it works the same. So the same code works well for IIS, .NET Framework, and for Linux and .NET Core. Okay, we declared a class. As you remember, to make it a web service, we must decorate with service contract and this additional ASP.NET compatibility requirement settings. I do not remember it by heart. When I need to do a service, I just find a good example and copy and paste. This is what I recommend to do for you, because also I think it's better to remember where to get good example. You remember cryptographic service is good example, and then you can just copy all necessary parts from it carefully. Inside of our class, if we want to make something callable, we can declare a method. This method can have some name. If you want to make a pretty, maybe prettier URL to call it, you can also use settings in Web Invoke called URI template. Now I tried to make it as simple as possible without URI template and to make it easy to learn. So we have a method name, and without any special settings, we will build, so we will make an endpoint, which means a URL that you can run with HTTP query with the same name as your method name. Okay, so we have method name, which will do some useful work for us. I need to explain some business logic behind this. So we can create a server-side web service, which will be a demonstration of some calculations, how we can do it at server-side. For example, our calculation will be to get maximum price from all realty records filtered by certain type and offer type. For example, we can get maximum price for all houses offered for sale or maximum price of all apartments for rent. So this is just some business example. Of course, we can do this with with no codes. We can do this with just the business processes, or we can do it even with just totals at our lists. But the main idea is not to make something that is also possible with no code. The main idea is to demonstrate the structure of web service, use of database, transferring parameter arguments, and getting results. And it's just coincidence that we can do the same task without programming. But this is just a simple example. I could easily do this task much more complicated, but it will be harder for you to read and understand it. So I tried to make it simple, easy to learn, and still full of all necessary details that you need to see when you build your web service class. So we have a method. This method is decorated with operation contract and web invoke additional attribute. We have important settings here related to how our request body will be organized to be wrapped into JSON, and a response also will be in JSON. You'll see what it means when we will get examples. And we have some simple arguments as input data, and we have some simple data type as a result. In this case, we do not need to make a special classes for type conversion or special settings for deserializing. But in real life examples, you may find situations where you need to transport much more complicated arguments or more complicated result data. In this case, you will need additional things called data type classes. And let me find some good example. I remember one of the examples, Visa data service, web service, this one, quite old, but still actual. So Visa data service example is a web service class, and we have methods for it, which includes complex data type for argument. This request option is not just is not a standard .NET Framework data type. It was declared here as a configuration class. So if you need to transport complex arguments, you need to declare corresponding data type. You need to use its instances as arguments or return data as results. I will find some here. This is example of method that returns some complex data as a result. And we need to find examples how it was declared. So let's search for request options. Somewhere here, we will see a declaration of this class. So if you want to make some complex class instance passed as argument, you need to tell Creatio how to properly deserialize it. So you can do this with special data contract attribute, additional attribute serializables, but the most important is data contract. So data contract here tells compiler that this is not just a class for your technical purpose. This class will be used for deserializing request data. And also, if you have response with such data type, then it will be used for serializing data response back to stream. And you can see such classes usually have properties or fields, and everything that you would like to serialize and deserialize must be decorated with data member attribute. So class must be decorated with data contract. Certain values that you want to transport must be decorated with data member. Some properties may be not decorated, it will be not used for serializing. And the purpose of such data type is to transport complex arguments or to get some complex responses, complex result data. You may find examples of data contract and data member if you search through our OAuth configuration, and we will search for data contract. We also find more than 180 different examples, which means that it's also quite popular thing, and it's used a lot of times. And each time when you need to transport something complex, like an entity which, so some structure which includes some text, some values, maybe some lists or other things, you can use complex data type for it. And you can find a lot of examples in base platform with using such data type. In my case, I tried to keep it simple, and that's why in my Visual Studio and my code, I use only standard data types, simple values, and it doesn't need it here to transport and to use data contract. Of course, I can do this, but it's not necessary, and I try to avoid unnecessary complications, so it will be hard for you to understand. So we have one single method which gets a couple of string values. We can do some simple checks of our input data just to make sure if they are not empty, then we can proceed. If any of the values is empty, then we will just return some error code, which means we did not do any calculation. Okay, previously we worked with the database. Maybe you remember we used the class named entity schema query, which offered us only one single purpose, reading data from the database. But it was supporting entity object model and respecting access rights and supporting caching, paging, and so all the things related to server-side entities. Now we have alternative option, how you can get data directly from the database without use of object model from any database tables or even views or stored procedures, something. So you can use classes to operate with data without entities. There are select classes. You can find insert, select, update, and even delete. And there are a lot of examples how to use them. I'm showing you one of the easiest possible examples because we use select class to read only one column from certain data. And this is not just a column. We use aggregate function, which will guarantee, if we have no any group by, it will guarantee only one data row of result. And we have filters where type equals to certain data. And please note, if you have a lookup column, our lookup column name in the object is called USR type, but the corresponding database table column has ID suffix, and this is kind of a peculiarity of Creatio database architecture. So if you have a lookup column, then with certain name in the database, you should search for corresponding column and its name will be with ID suffix. So here we have a filter, type equals certain value, and offer type also equals to another value. The way how we do setup of this class, I understand currently it sounds like a bit boring. So we new select, we create select class instance. Then we consequently, so we run it one by one with different methods, column, from, where is equal, and is equal. So we can build different and complex our selection query structure. You can find examples, and let me show you. If you search for new select, you can find hundreds of examples, maybe almost 300 examples of different types of queries. And maybe I can show you something which will be quite complex. Now you can see example with selection, columns, joins, and join conditions, and subqueries, and so on. So it can be quite complex if necessary. And we can find a lot of queries with different examples of. If you need, you can search and find more complicated queries. Now you can see examples with different types of joins, different columns using aliases, and so on. So queries can be quite complex. I'm still trying to make it simple. And this example is very simple because we read only one column, and we know that it will be only one data row. For such scenario, we can just use our class select and run its execute scalar method and provide this generic data type expression value. So we will tell that we expect decimal results. So system will run execute scalar with decimal data type returned. In general, select class can read many data columns and many data rows. And this can be done. And if you need to do this, you can find examples. You build select class, the reading column, different values, different data rows. Then when you finished your setup of your select class, you have to use ensure DB connection method to get DB executor. And you have to run your execute reader method of your select class, providing this DB executor as argument. And such methods are written in Visual C, and it's very old. It's before .NET appeared, and it's generally libraries that are hiding behind such methods are not .NET framework libraries at all. And that's why we have to manage memory here. So when we ensure DB connection, memory allocation is performed. And if you do not care about this disposal of your memory, it will be still allocated. And if you run this command many, many times, it will cause to memory consumption, or it's also called memory leak, when memory is allocated and not released. The same happens when you run execute reader, and that's why there are two possible solutions to this. You may dispose your object instance, so you're not object, it's just class instance when you finished work with it, or you can use the same with using operator to protect your data, and it will automatically dispose your class instance after this code finishes. The same will be done with data reader. So you need to remember, in order to protect from memory leakage, you must do double using here and here, or you have to use dispose method after you finished work with such class instances. This is because here we have example of memory operation that was before .NET Framework appeared, and this is the result of Microsoft SQL Server client software, which is part of Windows now. And this is how you should do it correctly. I remember more than 10 years ago, I was a participated in project development where we had a complex functionality, and somewhere we forgot to make these double using operators. And of course, we found memory exception. We found the excessive memory consumption by Creatio product, and we found such places. We made usings and it was fixed. So this is kind of serious thing. Everywhere in Creatio where you will see use of select class, and when you get more than one data row and expect to read more than one column, you will see this double using example everywhere. Using, and here is using. So this is traditional and correct way how to do this. And you may ask me why we are not seeing our using here. The answer is that behind this method, somewhere inside of, I will press Control and then I will try to make Studio to do some reverse engineering for me, decompilation. Inside of select class, technically it's in Terrasoft Core DB library, select class. We can see this method and you can see its implementation. So we will try to find examples and how it's made. You can see that using is present somewhere here. This code is not exactly the same that was written to before this class was compiled, because this is decompiled example. It's how Visual Studio tried to represent this code. So we have no original sources of this class. This is a result of decompilation, so it may be not exactly accurate. And now you see that system takes SQL text, runs DB executor, and has this kind of protection inside. So this using simply is already hidden somewhere behind execute scalar method. So this is the easiest way how you can operate with the database. In case if you read one column, you expect one data row, and execute scalar simply runs your query and returns your first data row, first column value of it. This is how it works. And this can be very useful and handy for simple situations in your code where you have just a quickly selection. So you need to make a quick selection of certain data from the database without taking care of entities, without spending much RAM, and without writing a lot of lines of your code. So this kind of queries could be really, really useful. And that's why I made this example for you. Of course, if you have mistakes like incorrect column name, incorrect table name, or incorrect conditions or data type, of course, you will face SQL exceptions and you will see error messages. So when we finish this code, our method will return some decimal result representing maximum value of price for all real-to records with certain type and offer type. That's okay. You may find this additional method and ask why we have this additional method here. Especially add this very simple method with a get query with no arguments, returning just string result. And it's only necessary here to make sure that our service was applied. We can make query to check our web service, how it works with just a browser, and no special tools will be necessary. So this is only for our debugging purpose, only to check that web service is present and fully correctly compiled. If we run this method for our web service and it returns some OK data, it means that web service was fully correctly applied and there is no problem. The reason why we need to check it is that if we have some compilation issue or something happened when IIS failed to apply our web service and register it properly, so we will not be able to run this method as well. And we will see error message, which means that something was wrong, maybe with our code, maybe with the way how we call it. So finally, this is just to make quick check of our web service. of presence of our web service at application server. So we have to finally save all our C# code on disk. While we design this code, you can see that it supports IntelliSense, it supports autocomplete. If I type something, it supports me with options. It shows me all possible methods and arguments, what I can do here. So it's really useful when you work with Visual Studio. It helps with all the missing parentheses. You can see errors. You can see it helps to see if you have something wrong with your code before you start to compile. Finally, when you finish, you can save it, and Visual Studio helps a lot with development of your own C# source. If you have only cloud-based solution and you do cloud-based C# development, you will struggle much more. You will face errors, which will be always possible to detect, which will be only seen and detectable when you start to compile or when you start to run. Visual Studio helps a lot. So finally, we save everything, and all we needed from Visual Studio is just to get correct C# code saved on disk. Then we go back to our application, select our package, and now if we look into our Realty service, we also will see the same code because it's loaded from disk. And if we do changes here, save, it will be also saved on disk. We can compile our package. Package compilation is several times faster than all system compilation. So this is a great advantage. And I expect to wait probably 20 or 30 seconds for this compilation, so not so long. And of course, it depends on how much RAM is currently occupied. If you have a lot of free RAM, your compilation will be faster. Now it took only 20 seconds to compile, and we already can check how our web service works even without running of our main method, because we have this simple get query to check how it works. Let me show you how we can check our web method presence and availability. So we can build a new tab and start to build a URL address. Our application, including 0 alias, we have to add special reserved word REST. This is just a text that is used as a standard part for automatically registered endpoints in Creatio website for configuration web services. We also have core web services, which cannot be changed from our projects, and core web services are already provided with DLLs, so you cannot change their source code, and they have different URLs and endpoints. For configuration web services, we always have this REST. Then we have class name, Realty service. Please do not mix it with file name. File name or source code name, it's nothing here. Only class name makes sense. Then slash method name, or if you use the URI template, then you can use URI template. But in my case, it's just a method name, get example. No arguments, get query, no any special settings, so I can simply run it in my browser. The only condition is that my browser should be authenticated, so my system should be ready for me to work. In this case, this query will work correctly. You see, it's correctly returned as some result. We can see technical network data, URL, response 200 means okay. We have response data, timing is perfect. So now we can write one more time. You can see that now timing is even better and the same response. So when you check it like this, I can share with you. When you check it like this, it helps to see that your web service is applied. If you work in cloud conditions, if you start compilation and then it finished some kind of so with no clear evidence that compilation was finished correctly, then you may guess, did it finish compilation or not? Is it correctly applied or not? And using such kind of checks may help you to understand it. So we already see that our web service was applied properly. And if this method is working, then this method also should work for us. But this big method is made with a post query, which is harder to do in our browser. Now I will show you. Now we will have a break now. And then after the break, I will show you how we can make client-side calls for this method, and we will call this post query from client side. Also, if you want, you can do debugging the same way as we debugged our solution previously. You can put breakpoints here. You can do attach. Maybe I can quickly show it for you. It doesn't take too much time. So we can put a breakpoint here, debug, attach the process. We need to select the proper process, but I need to warn you that I noticed some unwanted behavior after we finish debugging. So let's check. Maybe we will face it today. So we attached to our website process, but we also need to make a restart. You remember the fastest way to do restart is to use this restart application action from maintenance tools. Or you can use Clio restart command. We will study Clio tomorrow. Now restart is going on, and you see this breakpoint turned into full red color. Now reloading of the page finishes, and we'll be able to debug our code, but only when we start. So now we can debug this probably. So we can start this method. You will see that reloading of our application fully finishes. When method starts, Visual Studio will offer us debugging. Yes, we're already here. Now you see. And then we just press F5 to continue. Debug. F5, continue. And it correctly executes. Of course, we'll have huge time in here because of debugging, but it's okay. So it returned us and we are able to do debugging. So debugging works here. And if we run it a post query, it will also work. I will just detach not to spend system resources. Vitaly is asking, is it required to create source code in Croatia, or can we create some class using Visual Studio and upload? Yes, this is required. And let me explain why. This C# source is not only a C# file. This C# source also has certain metadata, list of localizable strings, properties of a schema in configuration, and also you can look into its metadata here. You will see some minor settings. It's not too much, but it's a metadata. It's separate settings which will be not created if you use only C# file in your file system. So you can use separate C# files. You can even compile them into separate DLLs and then add them to the files folder of your package. But it will be called file content. And if you put some DLLs into bin, they will be automatically connected to your application. But it's probably not what you expect for. So you must create C# source code item manually, and then go to the editor to fill it with right code and do it with comfort. Thank you, Vitaly, for your questions. It's really important for me to see that you're attentive, you're listening, and find this training interesting. Okay, let's make a break. 15 minutes to rest. And after this, I will show you how to make a call for your web service from Croatia client side. So we stopped when we created the web service. Now it's our turn to check how it works and how we can call it from Creation client side. So I will show you how to make your own button or action to run a web service. We need to customize our page, and we need to make a corresponding menu item for it. Unfortunately, we don't have no code options to start a web service. So we will need to write our own code, and we can do it with menu item. Run max price service. This is our title. We will have any dummy action. Remember, we need to make dummy action, then we replace it with our own method. And here, maybe we can use icon. Maybe we can use some image here. And it makes sense to provide custom human-friendly run max price service menu item. So this is a code. Okay, made it, save it. Then we need to open corresponding source code. We can do it from here, or I prefer to close and open source code directly from this editor. So we can search for max price. And we just remember, you can see we can also provide some parameters for our requests. So here you can see, remember line 162. Remember and keep it in mind, 162. Now let's go to our handlers part, and we will make a handler to call a web service. I already have examples. It took me some time to write it, but run web service. Okay, we need to use a special API module. So we need to use a creation devkit common module, and we will require it to load in our first line of our code here, and then we get its reference SDK. If you have many modules here, you should keep the correct order. So for example, you can ask for module 2, then you can use its reference here, module 2. You should not mix variables here, and it will be incorrect. So you should keep correct order. The same order as modules are declared in dependency modules array here. This is an array. The same order of module instances you will get here in your factory function arguments. Okay, we got it. SDK is here. Now I will have a copy. Oh, I need to make a copy for you, so you will not forget about this special SDK module. Then we go to handlers array, and we put here our own handler. I already spent some time writing it. So now I will show you this handler and explain it. I only need to copy samples for you. This part. This. And finally, this. Okay, so what we do here, we have a handler name, and let's remember about line number 162, hotkey, Alt G, jump to line, okay, Alt G, 162. And here we have a method, we have a handler name, which will be used for our menu item. Of course, we replace original with this. We don't need any parameters here. And we will just run our method. And we will provide some parameters, but I prefer to do it in our code, not in the method. Not here in the clicked properties. So, okay, we made all corresponding settings to user interface part. maybe we can just collapse this piece and then go back to handlers. Also, we can collapse unnecessary handlers. So we need to prepare some arguments in our handler. We need to make some arguments. We are interested in the value of type. So let's go to view model config, find the type, and here there is a type attribute. We need to copy and paste for type. But you remember, when you operate with a lookup columns in client side and you get lookup column value, if it's not empty, you will have an object. And this object will include several properties. Value represents ID of the data, and display value will be display text of selected data record. Sometimes you may get additional properties here, but now I'm trying to keep it simple. So we will have type, value taken from our lookup values, lookup object. The same with offer type. We need to find offer type corresponding attribute, copy and paste. And the same approach, if object is not empty, we get a value property from it. This is only for lookups. For all other types, regular data types, as we worked in these examples here, we just use this expression, await, request, dollar context, attribute name, and we immediately get some data value, which is already value. You do not need to use special properties inside of it. Now you see how we get this argument. So we have type ID and offer type ID because they are required for our web service method. They are arguments for our web service method. Okay, go back and let's continue. So we have two arguments. Now we need to build a URL. And the way how we will send this query will be with the help of SDK, with our Creatio DevKit common. So we can use its HTTP client service. Probably this is a class. And we have its JavaScript implementation. So we have some available methods. And you can learn more about this SDK at npmgs.com. I will share this link with you. It's written in TypeScript. Index DTS will show us all available interface items there. And for example, we are interested in HTTP client service, what it can do for you. Search. And you can see all supported methods, several get method implementations, several post, delete, and put and patch are supported. So this means that most of popular methods are covered here, and we'll use this HTTP client service to make a post query. But before this, we need to build a URL, and this is our base application URL, standard word REST, class name, method name. So when we do this, we combine this path, and then we have kind of this example, which includes our address, 0, REST, class name, method name. We need to build a params argument, which includes the same name of properties as variables we expect to get here and here, must match. And case is sensitive, so please be careful. And we provide arguments. So we will provide type and offer type. Finally, the most important line here is call of our HTTP post query. This is asynchronous call. So we do some call, then system has to do something different, wait a bit and get some response, and then get response body for us. In this new approach with HTTP client service, there are some promises behind it. So it helps us to avoid and do not see all this asynchronous complexity. In older versions, you use the callbacks and you use the service helper to call a web service. and you need to provide a callback function. And there is a more, let's say, clear vision of asynchronousness because you make a query, then you can do your own code, and then at some time later, your callback function will be called and you will get some response data. Here, we have no callbacks. We have pretty straightforward code here, so we avoid use of complications, and thanks to promises, probably somewhere behind this post method, we can see what we have. Post options, response time. Yes, this is a promise that what I expect to see. So it returns some data, and finally, it all supports all necessary things related to asynchronous waiting and getting response. Now we have this response object. This is in JavaScript, and it has body, and the property of response data is the same as our request method name. Plus, we have a result suffix. So this is also a particular part of Creatio Web Service architecture. So it returns as certain data with this suffix. Okay, works well. And now you see how you can get this data back. So we will display it only in browser console just to prove that it works. This is a client-side JavaScript code. So we need just to save it and make sure it's saved properly, then it will be immediately ready to work. We need to reload the page, and we will check and calculate maximum price for all realty records. For example, apartments for sale. Let's find. We can take any. Deepa is asking, is it possible to run any other API? Yes. So when you write this kind of code, you should provide correct URL, parameters, and make a query. I'm not sure that it's supported with technical things like headers and other things, because all these posts, all such methods are usually already including some standard header arguments, header values like content type, application JSON, and response settings there. So I'm not sure about such things as cookies and headers, but simple queries can be done with this. So you can use this approach not only for creation services, but for others. And if you need to run other applications API, maybe it's not the best idea to do it from client side. Maybe you should do it from server side. It will be much more reliable. And I will show you examples on Friday how we can use no code approach to call third-party API without programming using server-side creation functionality. So you will see, and its feature is called call web service business process item. We will use it in example on Friday. So now let's check how it works. We have new action here, max price, and we can check in our browser console if it works well. So we will check network tab when we run it. You see the query finished correctly with 200, means it's finished without problems, without errors. We have request payload. This is original source. This is just a text which was transported, and we can look at it in parsed view. Then we have response data. This response data is also JSON text. We can see it in a pretty print mode. And we have a maximum price data. You can see response object property, and we were able to parse it and get exact value. So we have it here, response max price. So it looks like it worked well for us, and from our Creatio client page, we were able to do this from our Freedom UI page, and everything looks good. You can do similar queries from classic UI pages, and maybe you will, so maybe you can use the same Creatio DevKit common utility, but also there is another module called Service Helper, and you can find examples with Service Helper to do the same queries in Classic UI. It's more traditional. I think that probably will not start new projects based on Classic UI. That's why we mainly focus on Freedom UI user interface and its programming. Okay, so we successfully called our web service from creation page. And this call was successful because we did not care about any authentication. And you may check that network query also was provided with the request arguments, request headers, and we had a cookie request header here. All of such cookies values were provided by browser. And that's why we did not face any troubles with execution, as well as our pages naturally work normally, and you do any kind of operation there and easily running your queries without any troubles, because browser supports cookies necessary for authentication. And this is how our creation server-side web server recognizes our queries and runs them without any questions. Of course, if we try to run the same from third-party application, it will fail because of authentication. Let me show you. So we can try to start our Postman app. Postman is a tool to perform tests of your web services. In my case, this tool will be helpful. Maybe I can, okay, I need to close everything. Okay, I will close everything. And now we need to make a query that will be like the same thing as we tried to do in our page. So we try to start this. We can check its URL. Okay, we copy it from here carefully. We go to body, row JSON. We can copy request payload, beautify, and then we can try to run it. Of course, it will fail because it's not allowed to start just an inner web service methods in your creation without any authentication. So now I will tell you what authentication is and why you need to use it. In integration topics, in documentation for developers, integration topics, it's important to know about authentication basics. And this is how your web server may recognize you as a valid user, as a valid client who connects it. In creation, we have several types of authentication supported. This article is outdated, so no basic authentication anymore. Anonymous authentication is dangerous, so not all the system will be available and only separate several functions. And the most recommended options are cookie-based authentication, which is the best because it's very easy to use and no any special settings to be done. And also you can enable auth authentication, but it will require running a separate application that will perform the role of identity server, and it will operate inside of auth or auth flow for authentication. And for cookie-based authentication, you need login and password. For OAuth authentication, you need application ID, also called sometimes client ID, and application secret. So it's also pair of values. Now we will focus on cookie-based authentication first, and this is our main primary interest and the easiest way to make this authentication. We need to go to reference and to see examples how to make correct queries to authenticate our queries. We will use Postman for it. So let's make a new query. It should be post query. We need to use our main application URL of its loader root part. Then we will follow documentation, service model, auth service login. So we will run this method. This is a post query. And technically, this web service is anonymous, so it offers us to run it without any cookies, without anything prepared at client side. Okay, this is URL. Of course, we need to provide body, row, JSON, and we need to have this settings of username and password. Case sensitive data, please be careful. Supervisor. And my password is this. So if I run this query, original documentation tells me about some headers, but Postman saves me for such routine things, and it adds some automatically generated headers, so I don't really care. I see Postman makes something in addition for me. So now we do query, and normally, if you have correct password and everything is okay, you have a response to 100 with no error message text. If you provide incorrect password, incorrect login, you will have error message text here. And you will see error 200, but it's okay, but with error text. Now we got 4 cookies in response. Such cookies will work as a temporary keys to operate with our website, to call our web service, and such cookies must be kept at client side till the end of your user session. Also, we can check your web service just to do the same query as we made with get example, and only for checking that everything is okay. We have cookies. Without such cookies, our system will not run this query correctly. Now we can try to run it. And if you're careful, you may notice that as response, we get okay, so web service works, but also we got one more cookie. Now we have 5 cookies. Previously we had 4, now we have the 5th cookie. So we have all 5 cookies saved in Postman now, and our Postman is fully ready to perform queries, and we can try to run this query again. We already prepared correct URL here, correct body. This is apartment. This is for sale. And we want to get response data, try to run it again. And you can see another type of mistake, 403. This mistake is appeared because of special protection, CSRF protection. You need to know what CSRF is. CSRF is a kind of attack which uses current user, okay, maybe I need to see CSRF, and I need to find a better image. This one is best one, I guess. So this is kind of attack which uses existing user session data. And the hacker, after user already logged in and works with certain service, may force this user to do something like click on some link without thinking of it or doing something like this. So accidentally running certain actions on behalf of this user using current user credentials. This can happen because users sometimes may be not attentive, may be clicking somewhere without thinking. So this is how some unwanted action can be performed, and hacker may gain some elevated privileges or may get something else necessary, and which will mean that his victim loses something. This is possible when hacker is capable to run queries on behalf of this user by forcing user to click on some links and so on. In order to make it hard in Creatio, because when you work with Creatio, you also can be such a victim. You already have your own cookies, which grant you access to Creatio, and hacker may do something for you that you will run some queries without understanding it. And in order to make it harder to perform, we have a special protection from CSRF attacks. In post, put, patch, merge, delete queries, we need to add a special header. For get queries, you see it worked. So for get queries, we don't need any special CSRF protection, but for post query, we need it. the key should, so it's a header. Header name should be BPM CSRF, and header value should be taken from corresponding cookie. We can carefully copy its value and put it here. Please note, sometimes beginners mistakenly understand this as authentication. So BPM CSRF is not authentication. This is protection from CSRF attacks. Authentication is provided by all 5 cookies that can be found here, or in Postman, you can also find them here. So 5 cookies provide you authentication. VPN CSRF only provides you additional protection from CSRF attacks. And if you do both, if you have authentication cookies, all 5, if you have special protective header, only in this case, your post query with valid data will be processed correctly and you will get final response. So this is how this protection works. In some cloud websites, I noticed that this protection is turned off. So it can be turned on or off in web config files. By default, when you install Creation locally, this protection is turned on. And that's why if I do not use this header, I will have 403. And this type of error tells that it's IIS-based error, but this error is not because of login and password. This error because of something else. In our case, this is because of CSRF protection. So if you enable header, then it works well. Okay, this is how you can call queries from third-party applications to Creation. You need to use Postman to make sure that your procedure is well planned. So you have correct URLs, you have correct arguments, values, and technically it's possible to run successfully. When you checked it with Postman or other apps, by the way, we have collection of different tools doing the same. Maybe Postman is not the best tool because it consumes huge amount of RAM. You can see Postman here, a lot of processes, a lot of memory allocated, so not very cheap from system resources point of view. So maybe you can find something different. I have examples of REST tools. Postman, you can use different other tools. Advanced REST Client, RESTlet, Insomnia, Hopscotch, Macoon. So you can see a lot of other competitors for the same purpose. If you prefer to work from Visual Studio Code, you may consider Thunder Client or REST Client for Visual Studio Code. And some very old school tools like SOAP UI, Fiddler, or WebStorm can be also used. And it's up to you what tool to use. Postman is one of the most easy to use and friendly for beginners, but you can use others if you save your RAM. Currently, I still have some RAM, so I cannot be so focused on resources. Now, we already successfully called our creation from third-party applications. If you have any questions about it, please tell me. Of course, if we start to provide incorrect data, we will have incorrect results and system will reject run. Our cookies. So now it's interesting to tell that our cookies represent another user session. Such cookies work for us as a temporary keys to operate with Creation. And such cookies have sliding expiration. Generally, it's not cookies, it's our session in server side has sliding expiration settings, which means if we do not use our queries, if we authenticated and then did not run any queries for some time, after 60 minutes of inactivity, our created session and corresponding cookies will be expired. So our session will be killed and our cookies will no longer work for us anymore. So we will need to get new cookies if we want to continue to work with Creation. This sliding expiration timeout is set at system settings. So if you want to change it, you can find timeout user session timeout, and you will see that 60 minutes is by default here. Also, if you log in into Creation, work some time, and then do nothing for a certain period, so after 60 minutes of inactivity, your session will be also kicked from server, so you will have to log in again. This can be done for security reasons and for system resource reasons. So as you can see, uh, it makes sense to kick users from user sessions if they do not use your creation. But if they work constantly, if they do queries and they do it from time to time without this timeout to count, then of course your user session may last very long, maybe several days. So there is no like a strict period of time where you have to log out. You can do it without limits. You can change this timeout. Minimum value is 10 minutes, maximum value is 720 minutes, which represents 12 hours. So it's up to you what value to set here. And as we already started to talk about user sessions and session data, it's interesting to tell that you can also see information about user sessions in users section. You go to access rules detail, very strange title, but okay. And then you can see sessions information. It makes sense to sort by start date, not end date, because start date sort will show you also sessions which are currently active and not finished. You can see this session is still active because it's made from Chrome. This session is active, it's from Postman. We can see all sessions initiated previously from yesterday and other days and so on. So you can get information here and understand who and how much time worked with your system. If you see session end date filled in, it means that session is over, already finished. If session end is empty, it means that our session is active and users can use it, and the cookies also can be used for it. Also, it's interesting to mention that there is a system table which keeps information about all users' sessions. So I will show it for you. Maybe you will find it useful. We will connect to the database, find D1 database, and the table is sys user session. Sys user session, created on desk for descending order. And you can see all user sessions ever initiated at our system. So it's pretty much the same data, but this is for all users in your application, not only for particular user that you can see here. You can see only for some user like supervisor, but in this table, you can see it for all users and from all the time of your system, all the history. It can be useful and interesting to mention and to see who logged in when, how much time worked, and how session was finished. Session end method 2 means timeout. Session end method 1 means manual login out. And sometimes system uses force method and tries to use existing sessions to save system resources. Each user session, when created, includes a lot of resources, and that's why it makes sense to use existing sessions if they are usable for it. So this is information that can be helpful to analyze your technical aspect of Croatia. If you need some kind of business aspect, then you can also go to Studio Workplace, check home page, and every hour application collects information about currently logged in users and saves it into some technical table and then displays this data for you. So you can also use this information to analyze and administer your system, to check out certain users, how many logged in, to see how highly loaded your application and so on. If you have any questions related to user sessions, please tell me. And interesting that ID of user session that you see in the cookie matches this session ID column in this table. For example, in our Postman, we have a cookie session ID AE0F something. Here you can see the same identifier. So this is how application finds out when you run your HTTP query providing session ID cookie. This is how application finds existing session for you. If you run query with 4 initial cookies without session ID cookie, application will create new session for you to take resources. And that's why after your authentication, you have only 4 cookies. Here, you have only 4 cookies initially. Then it makes sense to run any kind of dummy query to your system just in order to get 5th cookie with session ID. Then when you have 4 original cookies and the 5th cookie, you have full set of cookies that will not be changed in your user session. And then you can save this set of 5 cookies somewhere and run your queries with all 5 cookies provided. And this is the best and the most correct way to use cookies and sessions and run your third-party queries in Creation. If you will use only 4 cookies, it will work, but slowly, because each time system will generate new session for you, and it's not good from resources point of view. So system performance will be not the best. That's enough about calls from third party with authenticated and the session information. Now, a couple of words about anonymous services, what it is and how you can use it. Let me show you. We go back to backend, web services, examples, and we can make a regular example, which will require authentication, and it's possible to make example which will allow anonymous calls. But you should know that this is a kind of a exceptional scenario. You should not regularly consider that anonymous service is the good solution for you, because anonymous call will be not checked by IIS. You can easily get into situation when some hackers will find out that your application has a lot of anonymous services and they will try to call them without limits and finally make a DDoS for you, for your website. So in general, it's not secure. The most important reason that anonymous services are not secure. But you can do this. For example, you can do it as an anonymous web service with get query, and you can send your customers some links. And if someone clicks on link and this link leads to your anonymous service, that's how you can collect some important information without logging in, without any authentication procedure. So in order to make anonymous web service, as usual, you need source code. You need to write its code in a special way where you will not have user connection. Instead of this, you will have system user connection. The best way to get it, I think, it's not to follow this article, but look at this example. I will show you example which will be, I think, is enough to get anonymous web service call. So if your web service is called regularly, then you can get user connection from your current class instance thanks to base service parent class. This is okay. Otherwise, you can get user connection. This is a special and very important instance from app connection system user connection. This system user connection is always generated when your application started. It is used for background process execution according to scheduler. So for some inner system operations, Creation needs this system user connection. So you can use this user connection in your code. And this is, I think, pretty much enough to make your code working into anonymous conditions, because anonymous means no cookies provided, no session information obtained, and you still need some user connection, for example, to operate with the database. So in these conditions, you can get this user connection from app connection, system user connection. Of course, it will be always the same user. And this user for system user connection is set in a special system setting, which is called system operations user. And usually this is supervisor. That's why it's not a good idea to revoke licenses from supervisor. So finally, you have a code which will use maybe system user connection instead of original user connection. All other actions in your code could be absolutely the same. But the troubles start to appear when you will apply your web service into your website. You should make your own SVC file. You should fill it in with proper text and save. You should go to your HTTP services and HTTPS services config and make certain settings here. And please note, this manual is, unfortunately, this is for smart people. So you should guess that this kind of name is not correct, and you should replace it with something which will include only Latin characters without square brackets. If you keep it as is, it will not work. Of course, you should change this name to something which will be valid. So please check this if you try to deploy your anonymous service. This is something that probably is not the best example, but you can replace it with something with no spaces, no square brackets. It doesn't matter what exactly will be here, but it should be correct with syntax. And finally, you should also make changes in web config inside of your application for inner application web config. And the most interesting part, it's allowed locations. So you should also put your web service into list of web services allowed to start without authentication. It's funny because now you will see it. We go to Microsoft Web App, web config, search for, no, search for F7 allowed locations. And what is interesting here, you will see a lot of existing services in base platform, the smallest product, Studio, but you already have more than 30 different allowed web services to start without authentication. You can see some health check ping, you can see some recovery links, it's for password recovery. You can see some customer service portal messages for timeline events and for other things that also generated object web form service. It's getting data from landing pages and other things related for very different functionality. So in Creatio, we have a lot of existing, already programmed anonymous services, and you can make one more and change it and save it into config file here, add it to existing list of anonymous services. All of this is possible and doable if you run your Creatio on-site and if you have on-site implementation for your test and production. But if you have cloud target environment, all of these steps will be quite painful because you need to make a manual with full correct explanations of what to do, at what file to change, and so on. And if you want to deploy anonymous service at your cloud website, you need to make a manual, which will include all necessary steps with all full correct data, and send it to support team. And only support team can go and modify your file system configs at your cloud-based website. You cannot do it yourself. Only support system, support teams, and only cloud engineers in Creatio can do this. So this is a bit painful And if you really need it, then you should expect that it's not immediate action. When you send the manual, you will wait for some time till support team responds and makes corresponding changes for you. So please be careful with it. But it's possible. You can build your own web service, which will be called anonymously, and then you can run a query with this kind of URL. So you need to use your SVC file here and provide some arguments. So it's possible to call your web service methods anonymously without authentication, without any cookies, without any credentials, and it will work for you. And database-related operations will be done under this system user connection context and permissions, and it means usually transparent data access. So you should be very careful when you write your own anonymous services because it can be started many times by anyone, and maybe you can do some protection inside, like providing your check tokens, your own way to protect your data, or some check of your arguments. If they are not correct, then do nothing. So it's up to you how you do your protection, but you definitely should think of it because anonymous services can be called by anyone, and such services are not protected. So you can easily get DDoS situation when someone will start your anonymous services too often, and your website will simply lay down and rest. So it will not work if someone does DDoS for you. So that's all for today. And if you have any questions about it, please tell me. We finished example with anonymous services, and what I wanted to show you, one important thing, as we worked with third-party editor, we saved it on disk. It's very interesting situation that such code is in our package on disk, but it's highly likely that such code is not present in our database now. So when we finished our work with disk, we must run action, update packages from file system. In this case, our source code will be also copied to the database. And when we do delivery, our source code will be properly saved into our delivery package, so it will be correctly present in all other environments. DLL that we compiled is also saved with our package. And that's why when we install our package, system does not need to compile. But if one day you will recompile on your test and you forgot about this update package from file system, you will not be able to fully compile, because if you have old incorrect code, deliver it to test, because delivery is made from database always. So you will suffer. After finishing work with external editors, you must go and update packages from file system. This is correct example, and it will make correct export of your solution from database. This export is always performed from the database, regardless of the mode, if you run it in file system or not. Exporting of your package in order to do delivery is made from the database always, so you should keep your database properly updated with such kind of sources, edited from third party. You can do it with update packages from file system. There is a question. No, no questions, but if you have, please tell me. I do not see questions, so if there are questions, please tell me. Today we have some time for your questions. And this example of a web service was important, and especially if you use external editors, don't forget to collect your changes back to the database, because delivery is made only from database. As usual, we submit everything to our version control, so we can open it quickly. You can see recent changes. You can see that we have web service call. And we can commit it to our version control, then push to remote repository. And as usual, we can also do delivery to our test environment. Okay, now it's okay. Any questions today? your homework, as usual, is to reproduce today's example. Make sure you can successfully compile your app and run your web service from internal creation page from here, and with no problems to get a correct response of data. Also, please practice with Postman or other app to run your query and pass authentication first. And this will be also important for your preparation for the developer exam if you plan to get creation certification. Deepa is asking, Deepa, I think you cannot debug in Visual Studio Code. I heard that in some latest versions, it became a possible thing, but I don't think that it's better than in Visual Studio. So if you can debug, if it stops and allows you to run code, it's okay. Run it line by line, it's okay. I don't mind. But now I did not see examples that it worked well. And you can use Visual Studio Code for developing of C# code, but I did not hear that it can be used for debugging of C# code. Let me check. VS Code C# debugging. Yes, it appeared 1 year ago, but you need a project, you need a C# file, you need to attach. So maybe this can work for you. I did not check it, but if it works, it's okay. If it doesn't work, maybe you need to check some settings in Visual Studio Code, the same as settings. Let me check, file, options, preferences. Maybe you need to set profiles, settings. Maybe you will need to check your debugging settings. I'm not sure. I did not try this in Visual Studio Code. I only can know how to debug, expand, breakpoints, lazy variables. So I did not try. Maybe one day I will start to debug with Visual Studio Code. Now I use only Visual Studio for this. And set of settings here looks like different from Visual Studio. So maybe we'll try it later, not now. Thank you, Deepa, for this. And Andrei is asking, project package development. I did not plan to do this because let me explain about project packages. So we have different types of packages in creation. We can find it in development tools, packages, and different types of packages. Simple package, project package, and assembly package. It came historically that this one was the first. Project package appeared later, and after file system development mode was introduced. So it was interesting for developers to make possible to build their own projects inside of creation package and save everything, but it's still made on and based on file system and files folder and separate files made and managed by your external IDE like Visual Studio. Then assembly package appeared. Once you have assembly package, I think that you may not need project packages at all after this, because assembly package makes compilation in a separate assembly easily. So you will have this compile into separate assembly. You can manage this compilation from user interface. And for project package, you only can do this compilation and all the things made with external tool. You all have, you must save everything into your files folder. Especially you should take care about bin DLLs. And as a result of your project package, you will have set of DLL files, maybe one or separate DLLs. which will actually work for you in your creation application. I think that in project package, you have less control of what you have compared to assembly package. And project package is displayed here because it was a part of all project history evolution. And if you use assembly package, you will have almost, I think, similar conditions for development, because you also can build your own C# code. The only difference is that the project file CS, so C# project, is made by Creator, so you have to edit it instead of creating your own. But I think it's more comfortable and it's more consistent to Creator, and project package also saves its DLL. So I do not see direct reasons why project package is better than assembly package. And advantages of assembly package are possibility to compile it from user interface. In project package, especially if you work in cloud conditions, you will not be able to do so. So project package is something that is designed purely for local environments. And I think it's designed for C# code enthusiasts who do not really like user interface, who do not care about this part at all, and who only think about their functions and add them as DLLs into creation. So I think that project package is less integrated in creation system in general than assembly package. Assembly package appeared later, and it makes the same features. And the difference is that CSproj file is generated by application. You still can use your own sources, external C# files, and put it here. You still can add other assemblies. You have similar access to creation namespaces and the classes and everything. So I do not see big difference. Maybe some of you already get used with project packages. I think you can simply switch to assembly packages. Maybe you will not notice the difference at all. So thank you, Andriy. Thank you for your questions. It's very interesting. You can find academic articles about this project and assembly packages. I recommend you to use assembly packages because you have better control on it in your application with compilation. Kostya is asking, CSRF response C# class handling cookies. Is it correct? Mm,
Actually,
it
issue is
yes.
hello, Dmitro. Actually, issue is how we can handle cookie after responding in search system. It's mean we need create additional C# class for maybe finding this BPM CRF part and cut them using, for example, regex or something else. Is it possible to shortly describe how we can receive this information on search system? Thank you.
Okay, let me find example for you. So we have examples, and this is backend web service example, simple code, and query to start. And the source code, no. Migrating, calling, yes, calling web service, examples, overview. So as far as I know, example for, as far as I know, in C#, when you do some things like login, so I need to find examples. Maybe it's not very quick. Data operations, ORM, examples. No, it's inside of app. And oh, I can find authentication. Yes, I should be able to find it in authentication. Examples, C# console app. Yes, exactly. So let me explain how it was, how it should be done. So you have URL, which you do for authentication. You have a cookie container, And you still will use it regardless of CSRF headers or not. So when you run third-party app in C#, you will need to do something like this, then something like this, and then you will use cookie container anyways, because you will need to get all cookies after you do this login. So you have username, you have password, you create new request, and you still will have to use cookie container for your request. So it's inevitable. You will have to do this. When you have a response, so now you send your request and you get a response. Then, so you also will provide some arguments. And finally, here is your response. And your cookie container reference, this one, auth cookie, it will be still here for you. So this auth cookie, it's a cookie container which will include 4 cookies originally. And you can see main application, then it only shows that it's successful, but it doesn't show how to use next steps. So the most important is your cookie container. And when you finally successfully get your response, here you get a response, your cookie container will include 5 cookies and 4 cookies first, and you will have to use that cookies to make all next queries. So when you make a new requests, you will use this auth cookie as a cookie container for next requests in your third-party application. And also for requests, you can use alternative headers. So auth request, this is HTTP web request. Let me show you. HTTP web request in C#, and we will see properties, and you will see that it has headers. Now you can see HTTP headers and exposes common HTTP header values set, and maybe we can see properties. So I expect the property named headers. There's a collection. So you can get to this headers collection, and you can set to your request corresponding header value that will be, so the name of this header value will be BPM CSRF, as we did it, and the value for this header will be value of the corresponding cookie that you can find from cookie container. So it doesn't require any special specific code for this. And when you do next queries with your request, you should use cookie container from your login step, and you should also access to auth request dot headers and set header with BPM CSRF name and the corresponding value. So this is just one more line here, and possibly you can find some examples. Archive with complete implementation, no. And the data services, maybe we can find some examples. Create record, delete record. No, I need it from third-party app, and it's made from client side. References, so data, basics, examples in C#. This is example specially made, like platform agnostic, just explanation about what queries should be done. References. And no, we will not be able to easily find it. So maybe at community, you can find a complete example, including management of all the headers and including running of all the settings. And with this example, you can only see how we can do the very simple step for running queries. But the main idea here is cookies. You will find it in cookie container. This line is the most important. And in your request, the property headers will include, so you will have to add the header for BPM CSRF. Is it clear, Kostya?
Thank you. I got it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for your question. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for your questions and um, see you tomorrow. We will discuss handling of data events. And I will also explain you how to use Clio tool, and maybe we can try some some steps with a very new tool called Tide, which is designed to operate with Git and with easy access to file system. And maybe it will help us to run Git integration in the cloud. So the main purpose for this Tide tool is to run Git integration for cloud developer environments. So thanks for today. You will receive video recording as usual, and see you tomorrow. Bye.